Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that you are joining us tonight for a year behind the scenes at Bosque del Apache with Claire Revekant, who is Bosque del Apache's senior wildlife biologist. I'm Trisha Sanchez. I'm the donor care manager for Friends of Bosque del Apache. These quarterly calls are sponsored by our Oasis program, which is Friends' group of monthly donors. These are dedicated individuals passionate about preserving Bosque del Apache by giving a monthly donation. This group has been Friends' most consistent and reliable source of income to increase our ability to support dozens of important projects on the refuge in every season. We could literally not do half of the important work that Claire is about to talk about tonight without the support of all of you. So thank you if you are already a member of the Oasis, and if you are not, if you would like to join us on this mission, you can do so by giving in any amount that fits your circumstance and your budget, as long as it's monthly. So if you are giving a monthly donation in any amount, then you are automatically included as a member of the Oasis. Members enjoy the convenience of automatically recurring payments, but making changes and even canceling if you ever need to do that is also very easy to do within our donor self-service portal. So you're not stuck forever. And our most popular benefit, in addition to these Oasis calls, our most popular benefit for members of the Oasis is that they also get early access to registration for Festival of the Cranes. And some of you may know that some of our Festival of the Cranes events fill up very quickly. So that really is a great benefit if you are planning to join us in December. I'm going to post in the chat box right now a link to the Oasis program. So if you would like more information, you can find it there. Now, just a few more things before we get started. I am going to be sending a link to this recording out tomorrow via email to all of you who registered for this call. Please feel free to share that with family or friends. Also, Claire will be taking questions from the audience at the end of tonight's presentation. If you would like to enter questions in the chat box as we go along, I will collect those, and at the end, I'll present those to her. When the time is right, you could also unmute yourself if you like and ask questions directly. So that would be fine. I would ask, though, that we please keep all questions pertinent to tonight's topic at hand. I know that everyone here, truthfully, including myself, has many, many questions that we wish we had answers to during these uncertain times. But as a federal employee, I can tell you that Claire will not be able to speak to any of the current events happening outside of our refuge and outside of the topic of her presentation tonight. So instead, I would say for regular updates and news, I would invite you to get in touch with our colleagues at the Coalition for Refuge Friends and Advocates, or with our colleagues at the National Wildlife Refuge Association. I am also including their information in the chat. So if you have questions that you would like answered, please reach out to these folks. And they have more information about, changes that are unfolding currently within the National Wildlife Refuge system. Okay, so that's all from me for right now. Now let's go ahead and get started, and I will turn it over to Claire Revekant, who is, as I said, Bosque del Apache's senior wildlife biologist. And unfortunately, Claire is dealing with some wind in Socorro, so she's probably not going to turn on her video, but she is going to be screen sharing. Hopefully the internet will cooperate with us enough to get us through her presentation. And then at the end, maybe we get to see her beautiful face while she answers some questions. So whenever you're ready, Claire. And hopefully she did not freeze up already. Let's see. just see if I can. Oh,
Yay, I think that worked.
there we go.
Yeah, we're okay. I'm just gonna turn my camera on just briefly right now so you guys can see my face before I talk. But like Trisha said, I've been having some really slow internet today, and I think it might help my situation here if I turn it off during my presentation, but I'll turn it back on during questioning. So with that, I'm going to turn my camera off and then I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to ask Trisha if she can see my screen. Give me 1 second. And then let me know, Trisha, when you're
I think there we go. We're good.
good. Okay,
We're good.
everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Great. So I'm going to start off by just introducing myself, and then I'm going to go into talking about the biological program here at Bosque del Apache. I just want to reiterate and stress that I'm really just going to talk about the biological program today. I'm not the expert on our visitor services program or our maintenance program, but I can see that Amanda is in the audience here. So if there is a visitor services question, maybe I can help field it. But I just want to stress that this presentation is really just about the biology program here, and for folks to know that all of our departments are intertwined. We all work together, but my focus is just biology today. So a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Rochester, New York. I'm a nephew. I'm a dog mom to 3 dogs, one of which is a rescue here in San Antonio. I love to be outdoors and hunt and fish. I love to ski. I love to backpack. I frequently go on backpacking trips with some of my girlfriends, and that brings me a lot of joy to be outside, like I think a lot of biologists and a lot of folks here in the audience like to do. I started off by working with the Student Conservation Association. I worked on a trail work crew for 3 years at various national parks around the country. And that really got me started on this career path. And so I ended up going to ESF, SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, for an undergrad and a BS in Wildlife Sciences. I was the president of the student chapter there, and that just got me even more involved with the natural resource field. And so I pursued internships during my time as an undergrad, and I learned more about the refuge system and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I had my first internship at Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, which is in Massachusetts. They are part of the Great Marsh, and I got a lot of good experience there. Did some work with bats, and I misnetted salt marsh sparrows. I did Nectin surveys, and again, like it just got me more and more hungry for the work that we do as part of the refuge system in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I continue to pursue opportunities with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and got another internship during my undergrad years at Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge, which is on Cape Cod. And I worked with seabirds and shorebirds there, and a little bit of work with wading birds. And then passerines, because there is a banding station at that refuge. And I loved it, and I believed in the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I thought I'm going to work for this agency. And so when I graduated from undergrad, I was really lucky to get a position, first appointment as a biological science technician at Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge. I monitored all of the oystercatcher nests there, and continued to work in the common tern colony and with piping plovers and least terns. And I got to become a boat operator, and I got red carded and went through fire academy and just got a breadth of experience. But it was seasonal, and so I ended up leaving that position, and pursued an opportunity with the New York State DEC, which that's where I'm from. And I volunteered with the American Martin and Fisher Project, and did some trapping and did some occupancy surveys with the state. I went back to Monomoy for another season, and then I got an opportunity to work for the core bird program at Yellowstone National Park. and monitored all of the peregrine eyries, bald eagle nest, golden eagle nest, osprey nest, and worked a lot with raptors, and then did some loon and swan work as well. And that was really good experience. But again, it was seasonal. So I just kept moving around and taking opportunities as they came about, worked for the California Condor Recovery Program. This is where I met Mike Brady, our previous refuge manager. He was the manager at this refuge at Hopper Mountain and Bitter Creek when I worked there. Did a lot of work with condors and tracked them and also trapped them, and did lead testing, and then took birds that had lead poisoning to the zoos for chelation therapy. That was great experience, but I thought I think I'm going to go back to school and learn a little bit more about what to do with the data after you collect it, because a lot of my work up until then was field work. And so I went back to school and I got a master's in rangeland ecology and management, a minor in statistics, and I wrote my thesis on common ravens in sage-grouse core and non-core areas, and then I related those densities to human features on the landscape, like transmission lines, water sources, mines, things like that. And that was really good experience. And I thought, okay, I feel like I'm a more well-rounded biologist. But during my time there, I also got an opportunity with the Fish and Wildlife Service again, and worked as a fellow with the Directorate Fellowship Program, and wrote a protocol to monitor street-torn larks. And that's really what set me up for the position that I'm in now. That opportunity with the DFP program gave me direct hiring authority, and I was able to land a position here at Bosque del Apache. I started as the field biologist in November of 21, and then I moved into the senior position about 11 months later, about a year later. And it's been a dream ever since. So we're here to talk about Bosque. So Bosque was established in 1939. There are there's one designated wilderness area. There are 3 units within that area. The mission of the refuge is to provide a critical stopover site for migrating waterfowl and water birds, and it serves as a wintering ground for greater sage grouse. The primary purpose is to be held as an inviolate sanctuary, or for any other management purposes for migratory birds. And that's kind of the mission that drives our work. And I just want to back up a little bit further and talk about wetlands and like what makes Bosque so important with the resources that we provide for the wildlife. So between 2009 and 2019, wetland loss in the US has increased by more than 50%, or that's more than 200,000 acres. Most of this is freshwater, with saltwater wetlands being a close second. There are a lot of goals in place with the country to kind of offset that loss. But it just kind of hones in the importance of this refuge, Bosque del Apache, being a wetland in this desert oasis, and being able to provide water sources and food source and habitat source within the Middle Rio Grande Valley. We're one of the only wetlands within the Middle Rio Grande Valley. A lot of the loss for wetlands has been due to land conversion and urban development, land conversion to agriculture and other practices. But wetlands are really important. They do more than just provide habitat for birds. They improve water quality, and they help with flood and erosion control, wildlife habitat. They provide habitat and nurseries for fish. They sequester carbon. And then the human side of it, they provide opportunities for fisheries and tourism, recreation, kayaking, anything like that, which is largely managed by our visitor services program here. And I just want to also touch on this because this will be important for the talk. So the low flow conveyance channel, if you're familiar with the area, it's that big concrete ditch that extends from Albuquerque south past the refuge. That was constructed in the 1950s. And the purpose of that channel was to channelize the river. So we were getting these natural flooding cycles from the river that you will see on the left-hand side where it says Rio Grande 40 plus years ago. And then with the construction of that channel, the low flow conveyance channel, it channelized the river and it sucked that water into a smaller channel where it wasn't where it wasn't flooding and then the river wasn't able to naturally have those cyclical flooding events that would create habitat for wildlife that would deposit sediment and nutrients in the valley. Instead, that water got sucked into that low flow conveyance channel, and the river itself channelized in an effort to get water to Elephant Butte. And this map kind of just shows like the impact of that. So on our left-hand side, you have a bunch of like fan alluvials and different habitat types that are created from flooding events that rivers provide the ecosystem. And then you have that after the channelization of the river, that kind of disappearing, because that, again, that water's kind of getting sucked into a channel. And so this is going to be important for the rest of the presentation and why we manage the refuge the way that we do. So biological priorities. Here at Bosque del Apache, we manage for 4 biological priorities. And in no particular order, they're here on the slide. So the first one being we manage for invasive plant species, do invasive plant species treatment, and we monitor them. 2, we improve management for federally listed and candidate species. 3, we monitor water use and we manage water. And 4, we manage waterfowl and water birds. And all of that is a year-round job. Just as another note, biological priorities are different for every refuge. They have to align with the refuge purpose and their mission, and they're established by the refuge, creating an outline in usually what's called a CCP, or a comprehensive conservation plan, and then they're supported by our regional office. One of the reasons that we have these biological priorities is because they support our mission of serving as a critical habitat and stopover site for migratory birds, especially sandhill cranes. But we also have these 3 and 4. Biological priorities 3 and 4 are really important to us, going back to the map of the low flow conveyance channel, because the low flow, or because the river, is not able to score the earth through those natural flooding processes. The refuge goes out and tries to emulate those processes through the management that we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to touch on our biological priorities and one by one. So the first one being invasive plant species and monitoring. We treat invasive plant species using a multitude of techniques. So we will treat it mechanically using heavy machinery or things like harrows. We'll treat it manually, such as pulling, and then we'll treat it chemically too when we can't use the other options. Why do we treat invasive plant species? There are several reasons. The main reasons are we treat invasive plant species so we can restore habitat. That's mainly referring to habitat that we're managing for our listed species and for our water birds. We do not want undesirable plants or invasive plants within those areas that we're managing for listed species and water birds, because they'll outcompete native species and they don't provide the value that we're looking for to support the wildlife that we support here at the refuge. We also treat invasive species to maintain infrastructure. So we'll treat invasive plant species around our water control structures, like our slide gates and our screw gates, our ditches, things like that. We don't want plants growing around there because they could impact the integrity of our infrastructure. And then we also treat invasive plant species to protect invasive plant and animal species to protect diversity and native species. We want to support a native community here, and not allow invasives to control the refuge. So again, our main mission for this biological priority is to manage invasive species on the refuge for the benefit of our trust resources, which we all benefit from. Okay, 2, we improve management for federally listed and candidate species. So we manage four listed species here at Bosque del Apache. So starting from the left-hand side, going to the right-hand side, we have the southwestern willow flycatcher, which was listed as endangered in 1995. The second picture of the mouse, that is the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, which was listed as endangered in 2014. The third picture being the yellow-billed cuckoo, which was listed as threatened in 2014. And then the last picture on the right being the Rio Grande silvery minnow, which was listed as endangered in 1994. So something I just want to note here to get a breath of like what exactly we're doing for our federally listed species. We do a lot of habitat work and manipulation, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. But before I move on to that, I just want to note that in 2024, the Refuge saw the most unique detections recorded of New Mexico meadow jumping mouse since monitoring efforts began in 2018. And that is in 2024, we had 38 unique detections, and we started from much, much less than that. So the work that we're doing, it must be making an impact, at least the data is showing us that. Yellow-billed cuckoo detections in territories have remained fairly steady over the years. There's some fluctuations. Same with the southwestern willow flycatcher. But we saw more within the Middle Rio Grande Valley. We saw more detections in territories in 2004 compared to 2003. And overall detections in territories within the valley have increased in 2024 compared to previous years. Some of the things that we do for our listed species, or we install water control structures for them. That is really dependent on being able to install water control structures depends on like when they're active and when they're breeding. We want to make sure we do that work outside of their breeding season or outside of their active season, but also make sure that the work doesn't impact our water birds and the work that we're doing in the winter time. So we often have really tight deadlines and really tight timelines in order to do that work. Something else we do is we set back vegetative communities by using fire or heavy machinery. And that sets for the jumping mouse, the habitat back to like an early successional wetland meadow type habitat. And we also use heavy machinery to restore New Mexico meadow jumping mouse habitat. Here on the right-hand side, we're using a backhoe to dig a swale, and that swale extending from an inflow will help transport water or move water into the unit more efficiently. Something else that I'll note is that between April and August, we are doing surveys for southwestern willow flycatcher and for yellow-billed cuckoo. So surveys for the southwestern willow flycatcher will start in May, and then in June is when the cuckoo surveys start, and then they both go till July or August, depending on the animal. And then for the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, that will begin in May and then it ends in October. So quite a long period of time. Those are the active months of the jumping mouse. And for that type of work, we're setting out camera traps and putting them in areas habitat that we manage for the mouse. So there's a lot of overlapping monitoring and survey work. Okay, our third biological priority, again, in no particular order, is we monitor water use on the refuge. We also have to check water and help move water, again, trying to emulate the river. I don't know about you, but by being a river, being part of Mother Nature and taking on that type of work, like it is a year-round job. It never stops. We manage water for multiple reasons. We manage water for our listed species. We manage water for our water birds. We manage water so we can irrigate the farm when we farmed, and to manage our moist soil units or our wetland units. We manage water so we can do cocklebur treatments, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Everything that we do on the refuge, all of our biological work involves water. Water is life. So it requires constant attention, which is why we have Jared Montoya, who is our water manager, who's been at the refuge for many years. He's excellent at his job. And every day he goes out and he moves the water around and he takes readings so we can make decisions based off of how much water is coming through the refuge. It's really important work. I just want to note here too, I threw up some pictures of like what water monitoring or water checks might look like. It's not as easy as like just going out to a water control structure and saying, yes, there's water here. It's a lot more involved. And the picture on the left-hand side is a picture I actually just took today. So Jared and I went out, we had to clean this ditch. So something that folks here who live in the Southwest are quite familiar with are tumbleweeds and these open face ditches and canals that the Southwest is covered in. And we get a lot of plugs and we get a lot of ditches that need cleaning. And that also is intermittently a year-round job. So days that are windy like today, we might find ditches that look like this on our left-hand side tomorrow that we need to clear in order for water to appropriately and efficiently get to the units that we're trying to put water in. And so that can take a lot of time. The picture on the upper right-hand side here where you see the heavy machinery, that's a plug from this March. When we're having a lot of wind, we get kochia or Russian thistle or other tumbleweeds that will collect at our water control structures, like the Langeman that you see pictured here. They'll also get caught on other water control structures and they'll create plugs, and then that will create flooding on the refuge and into our roads. And so we use heavy machinery to remove those plugs. And again, that can be a year-round job. It's mainly in the spring and then throughout the winter time that we are managing plugs, which is when we're moving a lot of water or a lot of water is coming through the refuge. So again, like that can take a lot of time and we don't always know when we're going to get plugs. So it may look like us coming to work, realizing there's a plug and needing to refocus our tasks for the day. Something else that I'll note, it doesn't just stop there with clearing these tumbleweeds from the ditch, is underneath these tumbleweeds, you have a layer of silt and a layer of dirt that needs to be scraped from the bottom of our ditches. And that can take a bit of work too. So here in this picture where you see the staff is a ditch cleaning day where we all kind of drop what we're doing and go and clear ditches with shovels, which again can be quite laborious and time consuming. And that is, again, mostly going on intermittently year round, and we don't always know when we're going to have to do it. It just depends on how quickly silt deposits within our ditches. And then another thing that I'll note that is another component of monitoring water is also maintaining our roadways, which the maintenance department also plays a role in. And so here in this picture to the bottom right is using a chainsaw to clear trees and branches that fall over the road. And so again, this work just for this biological priority alone, it's year round, it's not easy to predict, and it can be quite time consuming. Okay. The fourth biological priority, I save this one for last because this is mostly what we're going to talk about today. So our fourth biological priority is managing waterfowl and water birds. The refuge is in an agreement with other partners here in the Middle Rio Grande Valley, mainly the state. The New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, to manage wintering waterfowl and water birds. So we work as a partnership here in the valley to manage the water birds that overwinter here and stop over here in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. BDA aims to support 50% of the mid-continent population and Rocky Mountain population of greater sandhill cranes. We also aim to support 50% of the light geese that overwinter here in the valley, 1,000 wintering Canada geese, and then 30% of the dabbling ducks that overwinter here in the valley. In order for us to manage those birds properly, we aim to grow roughly 2.5 million pounds of native seed via moist soil management and 1.2 million pounds of grain crops, which is what we were trying to do with our farm. And I'm going to touch on the farm in just a moment here. Something else that I want to note is that we aim to support water birds for at least 111 days between November and February. And the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy has a goal of managing about 8,000 Canada geese here in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. We have an agreement and a plan which we collectively call the waterfowl plan. The full name for it is called the Plan for Management of Waterfowl and Sandhill Cranes on federal and state lands in the Middle Rio Grande Valley of New Mexico. You can find it online if you are interested in reading it. And I can always send it out to Deb if folks are interested in reading it. The waterfowl plan was developed through coordinated planning of the Middle Rio Grande Valley Waterfowl and Sandhill Crane Working Group, which was comprised of agency representatives from, like I mentioned before, the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and Animal Plant Health Inspection Service and Wildlife Services. The refuge is uniquely situated at the edge of two flyways, and we provide a landscape level linkage between the Texas coast, Mexico, and the adjacent flyways. So the central flyway includes about 25% of the northern pintail population. And so we play a major role in wintering waterfowl and waterbird needs, including a considerable percentage of the central flyway waterfowl population, roughly 10%. And intensive moist soil management prescriptions are in place to maximize available food and habitat for waterfowl and waterbirds. And again, these efforts are in conjunction with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. So let's talk a little bit about that. I've said moist soil a few times, but what is moist soil? Moist soil management is a wetland management technique. On the refuge, the goal is to provide a diverse diet of plant and animal food sources that are critical for wintering and migrating waterfowl, including the ducks, the geese, and the cranes that we mentioned in the earlier slide. With careful thought and strategy, we work to grow a variety of seeds and plant parts and invertebrates that are grown in our man-made impoundments. So those wetland units that you see, or those areas where water is being held on the refuge, those are all man-made. Those are wetland man-made impoundments, and everything that you see that's done to those units requires a human hand. It requires a staff's hand, volunteer's hand, an intern's hand. It requires a human hand, and it's a year-round job. Moist soil management also includes three main things. So it includes drawdowns, flood ups, and disturbance, which we're going to talk about in these next few slides. Just to give a little bit of background information, like what is a drawdown, what is flood up, and what's disturbance. So drawdowns is the slow process of taking water off of a unit to expose mudflats and encourages plants to germinate. So what you were seeing on the refuge over the past month or so as the water was receding from the wetland units out on the refuge, those were drawdowns. Flood up is what you're going to see in the fall and in the winter. So as water is being put onto those units during that time of year, those are flood up. So it's a slow process of putting water onto a unit, which encourages waterfowl to utilize an area and feed. Disturbance is what you would see on the refuge going on right now with some of our tractors that are overturning soil in some of our units. So disturbance is the practice of using heavy machinery to overturn soil, bring seeds that are deeper down in the seed bank closer to the top of the soil. And disturbing a unit ideally occurs on a 3 to 5 year cycle, really a 3 year cycle. And the goal is to reset the vegetative community and increase seed production. So when we go out there with heavy machinery and disturb those units, we always, at least from my time here, have seen an increase in seed production. Just as another note, we actively manage roughly 850 to 900 acres of moist soil here, and that's across 38 units. That's 38 units, 38 irrigations, 38 cocklebur treatments, 38 actions being repeated across that 850 to 900 acres. So let's talk a little bit about more like what's involved with moist soil. We're going to start in the springtime since we're in the springtime right now. So I thought that would be a good place to start. Moist soil management is cyclical and it's 365 days of the year. So in the springtime, we're busy with disturbance. So again, we're taking our tractors that we have, we're taking the discs, we're attaching them to the tractors, and we're going out there and we're disking the soil and we're overturning that soil so we can bring those seeds to the top and hopefully get a higher seed production. So in that picture, you can see what that might look like. We also sometimes might use fire, and that can that can help disturb the soil as well and put more carbon into the soil as well. But fire is not something that we rely on. We use more of the mechanical disturbance that you see in the picture above. Now, I like numbers, and so I thought maybe this would help kind of hone in, the slide would help hone in like just how labor intensive disturbance can be. So this year, I'm using 2025 as an example. We proposed 155 acres for mechanical disturbance and about 100 acres for chemical disturbance. Really, an ideal goal would be for us to disturb about 200 acres per year if we were going to stick to a 3-year disturbance cycle. Because what we've noticed is that after year 3 or 4, the seed production in our units starts to drop pretty significantly. And so we want to have a 3-year cycle, but it can be quite challenging with the resources and the staff and the machines that we have right now. So this year we proposed 155 acres of mechanical disturbance, and we're going to offset the rest of that 280 goal with 100 acres of chemical disturbance instead, because it's not as labor intensive. Mechanical disturbance, so again, using the disc, not using a tractor to spray chemical, but just using the disc alone, will use about 1,000 to 1,500 gallons of diesel. That's based off of preliminary data that we just started collecting this spring. So those are not hard and fast numbers, but I thought maybe it would help kind of hone in, again, just how intensive these prescriptions could be. And for those 155 acres, it will take staff about 215 to 305 hours of disking. So that's 5 to 8 hours, 5 to 8 weeks of just disking alone. That doesn't include things like plugs coming up, needing to clean ditches, last minute emergencies that are happening on the refuge. Doesn't include drive time out to these sites, training opportunities, anything like that. It would take 5 to 8 weeks of just straight disking and doing nothing else but disking, which is really unreasonable for this refuge to get that work done. So having the resources to be able to meet this goal of providing food and habitat for our water birds is again really labor intensive. The pictures here I just want to show. So this unit on the right hand side, this is one of the 18A units, which you can see on our north tour loop. It's one of those big long units that the cranes like to roost in at night. We disturbed one of those units last year, so that's that bottom picture. And then what we saw come up in its place, instead of like monoculture spike rush or monoculture plants that are not providing a high seed production for our water birds, instead what we saw are these plants that came up following disturbance. A lot of that is toothcup, which is a desirable plant for ducks to feed on. So it does work. Okay. In the springtime, we're also simultaneously doing spring drawdowns. So as we're doing disturbance, we're also doing these spring drawdowns. So again, that's taking water off of the landscape really slowly. And that promotes that slow water recession, promotes the germination of desirable plants. Drawdowns begin in like late March, April, usually like April. Oops, sorry, my watch just talked at me. Usually begins in April. We usually look for a temperature, an ambient temperature that is above freezing in order to begin drawdown. So it can be variable when we start, and then they last through May. And so we're really at the tail end of drawdowns right now. Something else that I'll say here is the way that we do drawdowns on the refuge and the way that we do flood ups on the refuge, it's not thoughtless. We are thinking of multiple factors at play. We want to draw down units, not all at the same time. We want to strategically draw them down over the course of a couple months. So the reason being there is because depending on, again, the ambient temperature and the time of year that we're drawing down, we're going to get different plants that grow. So by growing or by having drawdowns that stretch over the course of a couple months or a month and a half, we'll get a suite of plants that are being grown across our moist soil units instead of all the same if we were to draw down the units all at the same time. We're also thinking about wildlife observation for the public. We want to draw down units that are enclosed areas and in areas that are open to the public. So that means we're still providing opportunities for wildlife observation within areas that are open to the public, while also continuing to provide a refuge for wildlife from human disturbance in areas that are close to the public. So we're thinking about that as well. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. And then we want to draw them down slow. There is a rate of which is ideal for us to draw the units down, and that's because a slow drawdown will promote desirable plants, whereas if you get the water off the unit too quickly or too slowly, then you might encourage undesirable plants to grow. So it's a bit of a science as well. Okay, then we're going to move on into summer. In the summertime, we do cocklebur treatments. So cocklebur treatments usually start in June and they last until July. On occasions, they will go into August as well, although that is not ideal. Cocklebur, for those who are not familiar with it, it's in this upper picture, this upper left-hand picture. Cocklebur is non-native to New Mexico. However, it is naturalized. It provides no nutritional benefit to wildlife. So we do not want it grown in our moist soil units. It's not gonna provide us the food that we're hoping to grow for our winter water birds. It tends to grow in a monoculture. So you can again see here in the picture, it's growing in these big patches, and this is not even the worst infestation that we've seen on the refuge. In order for us to treat cocklebur, we have to mow the plant, and then we have to flood it for at least 4 days. Flooding it drowns the plant. Then we take water off of the unit, and what we see is an opportunity for those desirable grasses and sedges and rushes growing in its place. So again, we have to mow the cocklebur, then we have to flood the unit quickly and as fast as possible, usually within the day, ideally within 12 hours of mowing it. Keep water on there for 4 days and then get water off of there. And again, in its stead, we see those desirable grasses and other desirable plants that will produce food for the birds that we're supporting. There is a cost associated and an effort associated with that. Like our machines have to be working properly, and we have to have the staff and the resources to be able to mow potentially, 850 acres of moist soil, depending on what units do grow cocklebur. Okay, and then usually in its stead, this middle picture is chufa, which is highly desirable by our cranes, and then this other picture below shows desirable plants and what can result from doing a cocklebur treatment. So we can go from this upper left-hand picture to this bottom picture just by, again, doing that mowing and flooding. Okay, then we move into fall and winter, and this is where we get a lot of public visitation, which most of which comes in the fall and winter time. In the fall, we are using our heavy machineries. We're using our tractors. They're used year round. They go from disturbance to cocklebur treatments and then to fall mowing. Fall mowing looks like two different ways. So we have in this upper left-hand picture mosaic mowing, and those mosaics will artistically mow in some of our units that we're going to hold water in there for roost. Leaving those mosaics is really important for the birds. They serve a multitude of reasons. One, they serve as a windbreak and structure for the birds to take refuge, to get out of the elements. And then the other main reason being is because they help trap seeds and promote the growth, promote invertebrates to use that structure for their own life cycle. So in late winter, ducks will change from a diet of eating seeds to acquiring more protein to prepare for their migration and prepare for egg production. And so what we normally see are ducks using these units, moving into these units that have mosaics so they can feed on invertebrates that are also taking advantage of that structure, that plant structure in those mosaics to grow themselves. And so they'll start feeding on those invertebrates. And again, like seed will get trapped, seed that is flooded up will get trapped in that structure and instead of getting washed out the outflow. And so that offers an added opportunity for ducks to feed on that food source. And then the other way that we mow is by slicking off units that you see in the bottom left-hand picture here, where we don't leave any structure in the unit. We mow units like this in units that we call our small grain fields. Those are generally fields that used to be farmed back when the refuge cooperatively farmed. And then and we converted to moist soil or these small grain fields after the farmers left their agreements. These units are really important for the birds, and they're really important for us too as refuge staff. They're easy to manipulate, they're easy to get water on and off, they're easy to manage because they're level, they're small, and they just make managing them a lot easier. We're able to grow a lot of food in them, and so the ducks go wild. And so you can see in this picture thousands and thousands of ducks taking advantage of this food. They tend to like these units that are more open for feeding during the day because they can see what's around them because there's not vegetation obstructing their view. And so we'll see a lot of birds in there. Something else that I want to say here for flood up is similar to how we draw down, we also flood up very slowly. There's a science to it, and there's a lot of thought that is put into our flood up schedule. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we want to provide food and habitat at least for 111 days between November and February. We will flood a unit up in September for early season migrants. That's usually one of the units that you can find along our south loop. And then we'll really start flood up in October as the birds are starting to arrive. So cranes start to arrive in October. Ducks will already be arriving by then. Geese start coming in heavier numbers in October and November. And so we want to be able to provide food for them so they can stop here and replenish their supplies as they make their way over to either their wintering ground, or if this is their wintering ground, then be able to supply them with food and habitat while they're here during their time with us. Again, we do this very slowly, and the reason being is because the feeding strategy of water birds. So by flooding up at a certain rate, which again is pretty slow, the birds are able to take advantage of the seeds that are picked up from the water as water is coming onto the unit. So the way that works is we start flooding the unit, the water picks up the seeds that are laying on the ground. The seeds naturally go to the edge of the water. So in the ducks, as you can see in this picture, will congregate around the edge of the water. So if you've ever been here in the winter and you've seen us float up a unit, you've probably seen them really pack in on the edge of that water, and that's because that's where all the seed is being dispersed to. If we flood up too slowly or too fast, we see that the ducks lose interest and they go find food somewhere else. So again, it's done slowly and it's done strategically, and similar to drawdowns, we're also thinking of the public and wildlife observation opportunities. We want to make sure we're providing opportunities for the public to view wildlife. We're also providing areas outside of public observation for the birds to take refuge from human disturbance if need be. And we're thinking about disease as well. So we don't want to flood up units that are congregated or close to one another. We want to flood up throughout the refuge from the north boundary to the south boundary. So we aid in disease management and we spread the birds out so they're not all congregating in one area, which would facilitate the transmission of disease. Okay, so just a little bit about the farm prep program. I'm not going to talk too much on this. So the refuge used to cooperatively farm up until 2017. The last farmer left their agreement around that time. And then the refuge picked up that work. So I'm not a farmer, but I certainly respect farmers, and I certainly can understand that their work is more than a full-time job and they're working more than 40 hours a week. When that farming, those cooperative agreements um, were left unsigned and the farmers left their agreements, that work was put on the staff that were already working more than 40 hours a week. So that was a big challenge for the refuge. And what we were seeing is a crop yield get lower and lower and lower every year, and a lot of resources being put into a program that we just couldn't manage with the staff and the resources and the machines that we had. And so you'll see here in the orange in the map, those polygons were the core farm units that were established after cooperative farmers left their agreements in 2017. But again, due to shifting priorities and staffing budget, the refuge has decided to move away for farming, at least for this year, and focus on moist soil management. So we're not spreading our resources too thin and creating issues across programmatically instead of just within one program. So we just have had to reprioritize. Um, the refuge will continue to evaluate its capacity to farm on an annual basis. The other thing that I want to add here is the refuge is not farming. The Friends have graciously took on the Regen Agricultural pilot study that was initiated in fall of 2023. And that project, I won't talk too much on it because that's I think Don Boyd would be a better voice for that project, but we're very, very excited about it. In the fall of 24, the project saw its second cover crop planting in 25 of the 38 acres. So that's two out of the four fields that are involved in the pilot study. They were experiencing some setbacks with the first cover crop planting, but the project hopes to welcome the germination of cover crops such as Austrian winter pea and cereal rye, radishes, vetches, plantains in spring of 25, and we're seeing that come up now. In May of 25, the project plans to crimp and mow and plant a cover crop using a no-till drill, and that will help establish a healthy soil biome that will hopefully set maybe a future farm program for the refuge up for success, instead of the conventional farming that we've been trying that has stripped the soil of nutrients in some of our other farm fields that have been a part of the program. And then the other thing that I'll add there is that laser leveling is hoping to occur for the remaining 13 acres in the fall, so October of 2025. So again, this pilot project is still early on. It's not like we're not farming, but we're exploring opportunities that might help set a farm program better for success. The other thing that I'll note here is we did try to use different cereal grains when we were farming before this year, and we explored the growing sorghum Milo, which is in this upper picture here. It's more drought tolerant, it's more salt tolerant than corn, which is what the refuge was historically growing. And then triticale, which is a wheat rye hybrid, which is in this lower picture here. But again, like we've had to reevaluate our priorities, and we'll continue to evaluate on an annual basis. Something else that I'll note here, if you haven't been made aware already, there are two articles that the Friends have published, and I just put those articles here. You can find them on the Friends website, and they offer they're a great source of information if you have more questions as to why we're not growing corn or what's going on with the sandhill cranes. They'll give you a slew of information. The other thing that I want to note here is that it's important to think about wildlife populations when we think about crane numbers. So I know that a lot of folks have a lot of questions about cranes. So the Rocky Mountain population of greater sandhill cranes, the population is stable, and it's been stable for many years now. Their occurrence on the refuge is driven by farmers chasing commodity crops at their pre-staging grounds that are further up the flyway in other states. They're impacted by water on the landscape, and many other resources will impact their migration. Migrating is really taxing. It's a dangerous event for birds and other wildlife. If they don't have to migrate and their needs are being met somewhere else, then they won't migrate down to us. And this happened a few winters ago where 5,000 cranes were staying at their pre-staging grounds in Utah and Colorado for a good chunk of the winter. But the good news is like when they spread across the landscape, that's better for the birds. Again, it helps with disease management. It helps spread the effort it takes to manage them across multiple land managers, and their population is stable, according to survey data. Something else that I want to note here is like we do a lot more than just these biological priorities, and we're more than this moist soil too. We support, over 15 researchers annually from universities and private entities. We work really closely with New Mexico Tech, which that relationship has been facilitated by the Friends, and we're very thankful for that. We support an annual youth turkey hunt, which we just finished up this past weekend, and that provides an opportunity for the local community and for the hunting community to get involved with the refuge, and that's one way that we engage with the public. I mentioned this before, we restore habitat using tools and equipment, and we use different management techniques in this landscape with us emulating the river. It takes a lot of effort, and field season is every day. We also do things like outreach and school groups, which is the visitor services department. But again, we all work very closely with each other, and the biology department will sometimes lend a hand, and we'll help each other out, just as the visitor services team will help biology out, because we are one team. And we conduct a multitude of wildlife surveys and seed yield surveys. So it's not just the yellow-billed cuckoo surveys and the southwestern wolf flycatcher surveys and the jumpy mouse monitoring. We also do turkey surveys, which help inform our harvest limit for the youth turkey hunt. We also do shorebird surveys. That data goes into a national database to help support the conservation of shorebirds. And we do seed yield surveys in August and September, which helps us get a production number and our yield of seed in our moist soil units. And that helps us determine if we've met our goal of growing 2.5 million pounds. It also helps us determine what units we want to flood up and when, depending on how many birds are utilizing the refuge. And we know how many birds are utilizing the refuge based on our waterbird surveys that we conduct from October until March. So again, like it's year-round work, and we have a lot of overlapping work on a seasonal basis. Something else that I just want to briefly mention here, if you want to learn more about this project, I encourage you to reach out to Emily, who is our river term. So the Lower River Realignment Project, we're currently in our 6th year of this project. It's a multi-agency project between the Fish and Wildlife Service, USACE, which is Army Corps of Engineers, and the Bureau of Reclamation. It's a multi-year project. It's 10 years long. It's an 1,000-acre project. It involves 3 river miles, and the purpose of this project, much larger than the refuge. Again, multi-agency. The purpose was to reduce flooding and protect infrastructure and meet water delivery goals, and to restore habitat for our federally listed species. What that might look like. So the Bureau of Reclamation was charged with moving the river. So you can see the old river channel here in this dry river. It's now a dry riverbed. They moved it a little further east, which you can see outlined in the blue here. And again, that was to address a sediment plug that you see here in the blue. In this, it looks like a kidney-shaped polygon. So the realignment addressed that sediment plug that kept forming, which caused a lot of flooding. And then it also addressed the fact that the river was perched in some locations, and so they moved it a little bit further east, again, to help with meeting water delivery goals. We right now are in the habitat restoration stage of the project, so it's really fish and wildlife focused from this point forward, with us being in year 6. And so some of the work that has been done over the years is taking this huge wall of salt cedar that you see in the picture on the left, and then using heavy equipment to remove it and pile it and then burn it. And then the result looks like what you see on the left-hand side, or sorry, on the right-hand side. This picture on the right-hand side is following a recent removal work, and what we hope to continue monitoring and what we hope to do in terms of restoring this habitat is to see the growth of native plants like willows, cottonwoods, mesquites for any areas that don't have a water table that can support riparian plants. Wolfberry, any native plants are going to serve as habitat for southwestern willow flycatcher, yellow-billed cuckoo, or other wildlife that the refuge supports here. So what we're trying to do is go from an area of dense salt cedar to non-dense salt cedar, and remove that invasive plant and restore it to a native plant community. That work is going on in these black polygons. There's one right here and one right here within the river corridor. So it's not the entire project area, it's just within certain areas of it. Okay, I'm getting to the end here. Refuge challenges. So I thought it'd be important to talk a little bit about refuge challenges. Again, in no particular order. We have several here. So one, we have water issues and we have issues with plugs. So challenges remain within our water delivery system due to being at the tail end of the valley and of the irrigation canals. This limits the refuge's water use and what is readily available. So any water that comes to the refuge is water that's not being used by folks north of us. We don't always get a lot. Sometimes we get surges. We don't ever know what it looks like, and it's really hard to plan anything with us needing water to do all of our management actions. The other thing I'll note here is that the Socorro and the San Antonio canals are not charged during the winter months. So for some of our moist soil units, we rely on wells, which again, the Friends have helped us pay for some of our well work. Actually, I'll just back up here. The Friends have also helped us do some of this salt cedar work as well. The Friends are amazing. And you guys are amazing. Other water issues are a water delivery system is really complicated. So it's a complex system of ditches and canals and water control structures that require opening and closing on a daily basis sometimes. And then we have those plugs. So we don't always know when plugs are going to happen. We can sort of predict it if we look at the weather and see if there's wind in the forecast, but we don't know where the plugs are going to occur, when they're going to occur. And it can lead to inconsistencies in our schedule or sometimes long hours. And then the other thing is that when we don't have enough water
Those are really readable, aren't they?
not from here. Hello?
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Claire.
It's fine. The other thing that I was going to say with water is when we don't have enough water coming through the system to address all of our management actions. So again, managing for listed species, managing moist soil, farm, then we have to decide who gets water. And this has happened in my time here where we didn't have enough water to do cocklebur treatments. Endangered species have reserve priority. So like if we don't have enough water, we push what water we can to managing habitat for a listed species, and that might impact our ability to manage wetlands. Okay, a second challenge that we have are invasive species. We have a lot of them here in the refuge. We have invasive plant species, and this picture is perennial pepperweed, which it can be quite invasive, and invasive species tend to respond really well to disturbance. So we have to be really careful and strategic on how we manage invasive plant species. That often requires using multiple different management techniques to just treat a patch sometimes. We also have bullfrogs on the refuge, so we have vertebrate invasive species as well. And those need to be, we manage those for the benefit of our native species here. Mainly with bullfrogs, we want to manage them for our New Mexico meadow jumping mouse. And then we've got other invasive plant species, Russian knapweed, parrot feather, salt cedar. It's the whole slew of it. Okay, a third challenge is disease. We have disease here on the refuge. If you have visited the refuge over the years, you may have seen us wade out into the wetland impoundments wearing waders, and you might think to yourself, I wonder what they're doing. We're usually picking up or addressing diseased animals. And so we have cholera here on the refuge. We have highly pathogenic avian influenza and avian pox. Those are our three main diseases that will impact our bird species here. I will say this past winter was quite mild, as was the winter before, and so we kind of have gotten a little bit of a break there. We did have an HPAI outbreak a few years ago, but that has since not been a huge concern of ours in the past couple of years, even though it's still present within the wild bird populations. Okay, another challenge are budget constraints. So our budget gets smaller every year while inflation and cost of services and goods increase. There are unforeseen expenses from things like heavy equipment repairs. It can be very challenging to plan a budget around expenses that are hard for us to predict. Is a machine going to go down? If it does go down, what's the problem? How much does that cost? How do you plan for that? It's a very big challenge. If how much is fuel going to cost? How much fuel are we going to need to do our management, to do all of the mowing in the spring for our disking in the spring, oh my God, disking in the spring for disturbance, or mowing cocklebur in the summer, or mowing moist soil mosaics and grasses in the fall. We're using our machines year round. So like, how do you plan for inflation? That can be really challenging too. We have some staff turnover that goes on here at the refuge, and we don't always have a budget until more than halfway through the fiscal year. So those budget constraints can be hard to plan for, even though we do our very best. Heavy equipment repair, again, I already touched on this. What and when is going to break? We really run our machines. Like we rely on them to do the work here, and we rely on them year round. We're using them January through December, whether it's tractors or a backhoe or a skid steer or an excavator or a grapple. We are using them for different work here on the refuge, and we really put them through the ringer. And so it's only a matter of time before something's going to break or need maintenance. And we don't always know when that's going to happen or what exactly is going to happen. So it can be hard to prepare for that as well. And then conflicting priorities. I saved that one for last because that tends to be one of our biggest challenges right now. So I talked a lot about different management actions overlapping throughout the year. What gets your priority with the resources that we have, with the staffing that we have, with the machines that we have? What is going to get your priority? What is going to get a priority, because we can't do it all. And so while we have, that's one of the reasons why we decided to let go of farming for this year and reevaluate our priorities, because during the same time that we needed tractors to manage our farm units and plant and laser level and do that type of work, the moist soil units also needed the same tractors to do disturbance and cocklebur treatments and whatnot. So we only have so much staff to operate, and we only have so many machines to operate, and we only have a budget that can stretch so thin. And so what's going to get a priority? And we have to think about that on an annual basis, and it can't be everything. I'm at the end now, so I just want to say that the staff here, while it may look different than what's pictured here, this was our most recent staff photo, are amazing. It's wonderful to come to work and work with people who are enthusiastic and passionate about the work that we do here. And along a similar vein, it's wonderful to work with partners, such as shown here on the left-hand side, that feel equally as passionate. We could not do the work that goes on here at the refuge without the partners that you see listed here. And mainly I want to point out the Friends of Bosque del Apache and the folks who are on this call. The way that I see it is that the refuge staff is a puzzle piece, the friends are a puzzle piece, our partners are a puzzle piece, our interns are a puzzle piece, and together we make one puzzle. And like, we can't do the work here without working together. And so I just really want to thank the Friends of Bosque del Apache and the folks who are on this call. I can't stress enough how grateful we are to have you as a part of the team and work as a team. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The other thing I just want to call out is interns and volunteers. They play a pivotal role in helping the refuge meet our management goals. So volunteers being another puzzle piece in that puzzle. And there's just no way we'd be able to get the work done without support from the volunteers and the interns who spend the summer or the winter with us, or select months with us. So thank you all around. If you're interested, I threw this slide up here. You could take a screenshot, or I can share my slides. This is just some of the work that I mentioned during the presentation. We're always looking for help. if you're interested. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you so much, Claire, for this behind the scenes peek at the year-round work that goes on at the refuge to maintain this refuge. We here at Friends, we often remind the public that Bosque del Apache is one of the most complex and heavily managed refuges in the nation, and we can see now, after hearing Claire's presentation, why that is. It's definitely true. So we are just a little over time, but as Claire said, we will stay on to take questions for anyone who wants to unmute yourself and ask, or if you would like to put something in the chat box and I can ask Claire those as well. Again, I would remind you, please keep the questions pertinent to tonight's topic. And one more time, I'll put in the chat box links to our colleagues at Coalition for Refuge Friends and Advocates and the National Life Refuge Association. So if you have other questions, you can field those through them. But questions for tonight, first of all, Claire, we did have one question that came in from Cindy, who's wanting to know, is there a list of invasive plants and animals somewhere that she could find?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if we have a list that is readily available for public consumption, but that is something we can talk about creating. We have a list that we keep for ourselves. I just we don't have it available for public consumption, but it's a good question. We can look into that.
Okay. Another question we had is, can you elaborate a bit more about what you mean by chemical disturbance?
Sure, yeah.
When you spoke.
That's a good question. So a chemical disturbance involves applying pesticides or herbicides on our moist soil units instead of using a disc to overturn the soil. And so we have a lot of units on the refuge, a lot of our moist soil units, but also our farm units as well that will grow bindweed. And bindweed is really suffocating for plants that we're trying to grow. And so we'll use chemical in a tractor to spray herbicides on those units to address those undesirable plants. And what we've seen in response are desirable plants growing in its stead. It gives the plants an opportunity, just to how disturbance does or cocklebur treatments, it gives the plants that we're trying to grow an opportunity to outcompete the undesirable plants.
You. KJ is wondering, could you go back and show the volunteer opportunities list one more time, please?
Yeah. Of course.
And as she's doing that, if anyone is interested in more information or reaching out to Claire about those opportunities, you could probably get in touch with her through us here at Friends. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Hold on. Hold up.
And so then if anybody wants to reach out to Claire, you can just, or Amanda Walker, who is the visitor services chief, park ranger at the refuge, also put her email in the chat as well. So
can you guys see this or no?
No, I don't think that you've got the screen share. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
It's just slow, probably because of the wind.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. What other questions?
Okay, so we have one more question. Can you talk a little bit about the work that was going on in the water near the flight deck? I heard there was some equipment issues. Can you address that?
Yeah, sure. So the flight deck was disturbed this past fall. So to address some of the equipment issues, in order to do disturbance work, we have to use specific tractors. They're called dually tractors. So they're bigger tractors than what we would use for cocklebur treatments or maintenance mowing or mosaic mowing in the fall. So those are smaller tractors than the dualies. The reason being is because only the dualies can pull the discs. The dualies that we were using, we had two, and then one had to be returned to the refuge that we borrowed it from, and the other dually that we did have had a mechanical repair that needed to be addressed. And so even though we started disturbance in the flight deck unit in the summertime, that had to be put on pause because the tractor wasn't operating it wasn't operable. And so when that fix finally occurred, again, thanks to the friends, we were able to continue that work in September, and then that work was completed in September. So I talked a lot about spring disturbance, but we actually can disturb spring, summer, or fall. And so it was fine for us to continue that work in September once the machine was fixed, and we completed it. And we hope to see a high seed yield this summertime. So again, we do those disturbances to overturn the soil, and in return, we usually see a higher seed yield. The reason why that unit needed to be disturbed is because it hadn't been disturbed in, I can't remember exactly what year we last disturbed it. It was over 5 years ago. And our seed yield, our seed yield in that unit was so much lower than its capacity and what it's possible of producing, that we thought it would be best to disturb it, so we can get those hundreds of thousands of pounds that it will produce, or tens of thousands of pounds that it will produce. Does that answer your
Thank you,
question?
Claire.
Yeah.
I think it does. I don't see any other questions coming in. Maybe just one last call for questions if anyone has one final question. But other than that, I'm seeing lots of messages of thanks to you and your colleagues for all the hard work that you guys do day in and day out to maintain this refuge. Hopefully you can see those. Maybe I'll just end by reading one, which says, "Great job, Claire. A very thorough, well-delivered and informative presentation, and I agree wholeheartedly." Thank you so much for giving us your evening tonight so that we can better understand what you guys do and why it's so important.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here with us.
I just want to say again that I really appreciate everybody on the call. Thank you, Trisha and Deb, for allowing me to speak. And it's been a real honor tonight, but it's also been an honor over the past 3.5 years that I've worked here. And this group is a wonderful group. And if you have any questions or would like to speak to me, my information is here on the last slide. You're welcome to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you as well for being here with us and for supporting Friends of Bosque del Apache. We appreciate you very much. As I mentioned before, these calls are quarterly. Our next call will be in August. So keep an eye out on your email, in your email inbox, for more information. As we have it, we'll provide it to you, and hopefully we'll see you at our next call. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.